The UFC is back this Saturday with a fun fight night card in Saudi Arabia, which means it's time for me to go through my full card predictions. So talking about every main card matchup, the prelims, making my pick on who I think is going to win each fight. Would love to hear your thoughts down below. Drop your main card picks. If you agree, disagree with me, let me know. But let's dive right into the first matchup here. There will be timestamps if you guys want to jump around. We're going to start off on the early prelims here with Abdul-Kareem Al-Selwady going up against Bolaji Oki. Al-Selwady had a really impressive Dana White Contender Series performance. He was going up against George Hardwick, who is, a guy who had a lot of hype behind him coming in as a Cage Warriors champion. Kind of just picked him apart from the outside, mixed it up on him, and really just stifled a lot of Hardwick's offense. So I think a lot of people were interested to see what he would do in the UFC. In his debut, he did not have a great performance against Loic Rabajov, was kind of just getting bodied. Beaten for the majority of that fight until he got finished in the third round. So the debut wasn't great. Oki is 1-1 in the UFC. He had a nasty KO on the Contender Series. He mixes it up on the feet, has power in his hands, throws elbows, knees, really impressive body work. When we look at Al-Selwady here, in his 4 losses, he has been knocked out in all 4 of them. So I just think Bolaji is the cleaner guy on the feet. I think he has more finishing upside, and I do think he is going to win this one by knockout. So going with Bolaji Oki to KO Al-Selwady. Now moving over to a heavyweight matchup here, we have Hamdy Abdelwahab taking on Jamal Pogues. This is probably going to be a pretty sloppy heavyweight fight. We kind of have 2 of these on this card. Hamdy actually had a pretty fun debut all the way back in 2022. Then he proceeded to get suspended for 2 years by USADA, and then got hit with another 6-month suspension. So pretty much he has been juiced to the gills and has been out for a very, very long time. But he has an Olympic wrestling background. He hits pretty hard. He looked, I guess, pretty decent in his first UFC fight, although physique-wise, he still looked, pretty big, didn't seem to be in the best shape. And the fact that that was him on steroids, that is not ideal. Jamal Pogues is pretty much like a meh heavyweight. He's 2-1, but those wins are over Josh Parisian and Thomas Peterson. Peterson also fighting on this card. He's, I guess, like a volume striker for the heavyweight weight class. Doesn't have a ton of KO power, like not someone against real competition who's just going to go out and nuke dudes. In his fight against Thomas Peterson, he did get held down for 3 minutes when he, was on his back, didn't really have many get-up opportunities. That didn't look great, and going up against someone who is, a high-caliber wrestler, that does not seem like a great sign. So for Hamdy, even though he's been super inactive, obviously with the suspensions, we don't know what he's going to look like when he's actually clean. I still favor him in this matchup. I think he has the power to find a finish on the feet, but I think if he can get his wrestling going, that's probably the path of least resistance here in this fight. So I'm going to go with Hamdy by knockout. We'll go round 1. Could see this happening on the feet, or him, maybe clipping him, getting a takedown, and then finishing with some ground and pound. But Hamdy by KO is going to be my pick. Now moving on with the prelims here, we have Bogdan Grad taking on Lucas Alexander. This is Grad's UFC debut. Both these guys have kind of struggled against top competition like UFC caliber, Dana White Contender Series comp. Alexander's 1-2 in the UFC. He has been finished in both of his losses by Brito and Sergei. In Grad's first shot on the Contender Series, he was KO'd by Tom Nolan. It was a pretty vicious finish. It ended quickly. That was honestly just pretty brutal matchmaking. He's a featherweight, so he was fighting up at 155 against Tom Nolan, who is like a massive lightweight, huge frame, super tall, crazy long reach, and Grad isn't some sort of huge 145er, so the matchmaking was pretty egregious. I think when you look at Alexander, he's pretty much just a locked-in striker. 3 of his 8 wins are by knockout, 5 by decision. I think Bogdan Grad mixes things up better. I think he's more well-rounded. He mixes in the wrestling, has solid submission skills, some nice ground and pound. I just think he's the more well-rounded guy in this matchup. And the fact that Alexander isn't like a pure finisher, despite being primarily a striker, I don't think that's great. So I think Bogdan Grad gets this done in his debut, and I'm going to pick him by submission. Now moving over to the first women's fight here, we have Jasmine Jasudavicius taking on Mayra Bueno Silva. This is MBS moving back down to 125. She had back-to-back losses up at women's bantamweight. She lost in the title shot against Raquel Pennington. Not a great performance. And then she also lost in her next fight against Macy Chiasson, where she just had that gross, gruesome cut that ended up stopping that one. She is a pure submission artist here. 7 of her 10 wins are by submission. She has a submission win over Holly Holm, so pretty impressive there. When you look at Jasmine, she really just has relentless wrestling. She has great cardio for the weight class. She can land volume, ground and pound. Not going to land like these huge, massive shots, but she's going to put a pace. She's always going to be doing something, whether it's looking for a submission or landing shots on the ground. And she's also shown in her last like 3-ish fights that she can wear these women down and then find late finishes, particularly with her submission skills. I think in this matchup, Jasmine's probably going to be the better striker. Even though MBS is coming down, Jasmine's definitely going to have the larger frame. I think the big question is just, can Mayra Bueno Silva catch her? I don't expect Jasmine Jasudavicius to completely abandon her wrestling. So if she is going to be, spam shooting, can MBS find a submission? I'm sure it's possible, but I'm still going to side with Jasudavicius here by decision. I just think she's going to wear MBS down. We saw her kind of fading in that Raquel Pennington fight. Doesn't have the best cardio. Also cutting more weight. I don't think that's really going to help her case. I think Jasmine's going to push a pace. I think she's going to win a decision here. Could see her maybe dropping the first round and then picking up the second and the third. Then we have a pretty fun matchup here between Firas Ziam and Mike Davis. These guys are both just solid, well-rounded fighters here in the lightweight division. Ziam is 6-2 in the UFC. He is on a 4-fight win streak. His last win was a super impressive knee KO against Matt Frivola. Put him out cold. I think it was on the Paris card. Just a super nasty finish. Good to see kind of some finishing upside out of him. Hadn't really been something we'd seen in the UFC so far. And then Mike Davis is 4-1 in the UFC. His only UFC loss was his debut against Gilbert Burns. So tough to really fault him losing to a guy like Gilbert Burns. The issue with Mike Davis is he just has not been very active. He has had 5 fights in nearly 6 years in the promotion, so he's pretty much averaging like 1 fight each year. He is clean striking, he hits hard, but also mixes in the wrestling. I'd say Firas Ziam prefers to keep it standing, but can also kind of mix it up. I expect this to be a close fight, but I do just slightly favor Mike Davis in this matchup. I think he's the slightly cleaner striker. I think he has more finishing upside. Like I said, I think it's going to be competitive, but I think he ends up edging it out by decision. Would not be shocked if this was like 2-1, a split decision. I do think it's going to be close, but going to be going with Davis. Now, in that same weight class, we have Terrance McKinney going up Damir Hadzovic. McKinney is pretty much like the definition of a glass cannon. He is kill or be killed. He has an 100% finish rate in both his wins and his losses. So his 15 wins, 7 KOs, 8 subs, 0 decisions. And then his 7 losses, he has been knocked out 5 times, and then he has been submitted 2 times. In the UFC, he is 5-4. Started off like very impressive back-to-back wins, a KO over Matt Frivola, and then a submission over Firas Ziam, who we just talked about here. Since then, though, he has gone 3-4. The losses have been to pretty solid competition. Esteban Ribovics, Nazim Sadikov, Ismail Bonfim, Drew Dober. Like, that is legit competition. Guys who are potentially climbing to the top 15. A guy like Drew Dober, who has been ranked at some point. And I mean, he nearly like nuked Drew Dober just super early on in that first round. But then you look at the wins. Brendan Marat, Mike Breeden, Eric Gonzalez. Those 3 guys have a combined record of 1-8 in the UFC. So he's losing to like the higher skilled guys, and then he's just completely running through the guys that probably don't belong in the promotion or like right towards the bottom end of the organization. So not great. I guess the question here is like, what type of fighter is Damir? His last fight was in July of 2022, so he's been very inactive. And also not great that he's 38 years old and has that long of a layoff. He has been out-grappled in each of his last 4 losses. We look at his fight against Mark Diakese. He was taken down 8 times, controlled for 14 minutes, which is crazy for a 3-round fight. He was subbed by Renato Moicano in under a minute. Christos Yagos landed 6 takedowns, had over a round of control time on him, and then Alan Patrick took him down 9 times and racked up 12 minutes of control time. Even though I think most people in the UFC, like UFC fans, view Terrance McKinney as like a knockout specialist, like I said, he actually has more submissions than he does have KOs. And so he is a legit grappler, has an impressive submission game. I think if he takes the path of least resistance here, he can find the takedown, find the submission. Now, we know he likes to fight, very sporadically. He's going to go out, he's going to throw bombs, he's going to throw fight-ending strikes. You're just hoping he doesn't like gas himself out or get clipped early on. He's coming off a fight where he was KO'd in under 40 seconds. You hope he comes in with a smart game plan. I am going to pick him with a round 1 submission. If Terrance McKinney's winning, he is winning inside the distance, and it's probably going to be in the first round. So I think he's going to find that submission, but I do just think he gets it done. I don't think Damir is quite on his level, especially just in terms of finishing upside. Now, going back up to the heavyweight weight class, I talked about how he had another one of these sloppy matchups. We have Shamil Gaziev taking on Thomas Peterson. Shamil Gaziev, kind of like a meme in the MMA community at this point. He definitely isn't some sort of like elite heavyweight prospect, but he's decent, someone who I think is going to have a great shot against pretty much anyone outside the top 15. He can wrestle, he's durable, isn't the worst striker in the world, obviously not the best, doesn't have the craziest power, but can rack up some volume, isn't going to put himself in terrible situations. We saw in his last fight, he racked up 12 minutes of control time on Dontel Mays. On the other side here with Thomas Peterson, he's like just another example of like an Apex heavyweight. These guys that are just like randomly on a main card of a bad Apex fight night. He's 6'1", 74-inch reach. That is not a frame that should be like a 260-pound heavyweight. He's pretty much just like an inflated middleweight. I mean, that size you could honestly be a welterweight if he was in great shape. He's a grinder. He can find a takedown, rack up some control, land some ground and pound. I just think Shamil Gaziev is the better all-around fighter, and I think he gets this done with a pretty gross, sloppy decision. Would not be shocked if he found a finish, but my pick is going to be Gaziev by decision. Now, moving down to a featherweight matchup between Muhammad Naimov and Khan Afli. I think in this matchup, Naimov is definitely the more well-rounded guy. He had a KO win in his debut against Malarkey. He picked up a decision win in his fight against Nathaniel Wood. Was somewhat controversial. He had a lot of fouls. Probably should have had a point taken. But still, to be competitive, even if it should have been like a 28-28 draw, is still a pretty good sign against a guy like Nathaniel Wood. And in that fight, he relied more on his wrestling. 4 takedowns, 7 minutes of control time. I think Afli is fine, but his jiu-jitsu is definitely his best area. And I just don't think he has the wrestling to get there against top competition, especially against a guy like Muhammad Naimov, who I do think is very capable on the ground. He was KO'd badly in the tough finale, so not overly high on Afli here. I think Naimov's going to get it done. The question is how. Could see a knockout, but I'm going to pick Naimov by decision in this matchup. Now we're on to one of the more fun fights on this card. Said Nurmagomedov taking on Vinicius Oliveira. I think this is a super interesting matchup here. I will say, Said Nurmagomedov has the name. We are not getting 3 straight weeks of, Khabib team guys here. He is unrelated to Khabib, even though he has the same last name. And he's actually someone who is primarily a striker. He does have very impressive submission skills, has a nasty guillotine, a nice ninja choke, but he's more so finding those submissions when people are trying to wrestle him. He'll use it, to kind of fend off takedowns, but he's typically not someone who's looking for the takedown to rack up control time. He has great kicks, nice spinning attacks. He has been out for a while, hasn't fought in almost a year and a half, so that's not an ideal situation. On the other side with Oliveira, he is super dangerous. He is 21-3. In those 21 wins, has 18 finishes, 16 knockouts, 2 submissions. He is 2-0 in the UFC with 2 pretty impressive wins. Had a flying knee KO against Sopai, who we just saw pick up his first UFC win against Ricky Turcios. That was like a, KO of the year contender. Could have potentially won if it wasn't for the Max Holloway knockout. And then he had a unanimous decision win against Ricky Simone, who is someone who's been in the top 15, a very solid fighter at bantamweight. He throws everything at pretty much 100%. Like, everything he throws, he wants to finish you with it. He's explosive, but he's also a little bit reckless, can put himself in some bad spots. I think Said Nurmagomedov is going to be the more composed guy in this matchup. He's never been finished, so if Oliveira catches him, he 100% could put him out. But I think Said's going to be defensively responsible. I think Oliveira can put himself in a bad spot, potentially run into a submission. Maybe he runs into, some spinning kick or something that Nurmagomedov's throwing. But I do favor Said in this matchup. I'm going to pick him by decision. Outside of the submissions, hasn't been a super, high-volume finisher, especially in the UFC. So I think he gets it done by decision. I think Oliveira maybe might start to gas himself out. He throws things very hard, like I said. Takes a toll on his cardio base. So going to pick Nurmagomedov here by decision. Then we are going to go back up to heavyweight with Sergei Pavlovich taking on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Pretty much like a little over a year ago, Sergei Pavlovich looked like he was unbeatable. He looked like the Terminator. He was on a 6-fight win streak. All of them were round 1 knockouts. Like, he was the scariest dude in the division. Then he had that interim title fight against Tom Aspinall. Kind of clipped Tom early on, but Tom clipped him right back. Was knocked out, kind of hurt the aura a little bit, but still someone who was viewed as super dangerous. Like, that was a fight everyone was expecting to see again at some point. Then he gets booked against Alexander Volkov. And Volkov, a very good heavyweight, They had trained together. The stories were that, he got the better of Volkov in those matchups. And Volkov really just picked him apart. Pavlovich could not close the distance. He headhunted, didn't use any kicks, didn't use any body work, and pretty much just got like jabbed and teeped to death by Volkov. And then also kind of had like an outburst after where he was frustrated, pushed Volkov. The thing here with Pavlovich is he still has that nuclear power that hasn't gone away just because he's fought against two very good guys in Tom Aspinall and in Alexander Volkov. When we look at Jairzinho Rozenstruik here, he has won 3 of his last 4, but the wins have not been against the best competition. He has a decision win over Tai Tuivasa. He has a win, stoppage, like round 4 on the corner against Shamil Gaziev. And then he has a round 1 KO over Chris Daukaus. He has really struggled, though, against top competition. L's to Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gane, Curtis Blades, Volkov, Jailton Almeida. He's a powerful striker, can fight from the outside, but I don't think he can do it as effectively as a guy like Volkov. Like Volkov's 6'7", long reach, uses the jab, uses his teep kicks. Rozenstruik, he just doesn't have the same frame. If you guys remember the Francis Ngannou fight, Rozenstruik looked decent in the first 10, 15 seconds where he's landing the low kicks, kind of chipping away at Francis. And then Francis just decides I'm the more powerful guy. I'm just going to sprint in, throw haymakers, and he knocked him out in under 30 seconds. I feel like that's something that could happen here with Sergei, where if Sergei really just wants to go out there and sprint at him throwing bombs, I think Sergei is going to win that fight. So I'm going to go with Sergei Pavlovich here. We'll go round 1 knockout. I think he gets back, in the W column here and starts a new winning streak. Then in the co-main event, we have a very fun stand-up fight between Shara Magomedov and Michael Venom Page. We have MVP moving up to 185 for just this fight. Believe he said this was a one-off, and then he'll be going back down to welterweight. Clear striker versus striker matchup. Shara Bullet is 4-0 in the UFC. He's coming off that nasty double-spinning back fist KO, another contender for knockout of the year. He is a high-volume striker, throws a ton of kicks, very kick-heavy, mixes it up, legs, body, head, will throw some spinning things, lead leg kicks. He mixes it up a ton. Even though he is Russian, has the Magomedov name, he is not someone who is looking to wrestle at all. He has 0 takedowns landed in his 4 UFC fights. On the other side with Michael Venom Page, he has a very, very unique style, keeps his hands pretty much completely down. He leaps, lunges in, closes distance insanely fast, and can cover a ton of distance in a very, very short period of time. He's very patient, not someone who always needs to be throwing things out there. Typically the patience is because he's expecting someone to want to be taking him down, so he doesn't want to give him a million opportunities, but still very dangerous, can hit very hard. He is a finisher. I think this is a very interesting matchup because typically you'd assume 2 good strikers, both unranked. The guy moving up in weight probably is at the disadvantage here, but is Shara Bullet actually going to maximize his size, right? When we look at their height, their reach, MVP is actually the taller guy with the longer reach. Shara probably will be the heavier guy in there, but if he is not clinching, trying to take MVP down like we've seen his other opponents try to do, I don't know if that size difference is really going to matter. And if you're just going to go in and be in a pure stand-up fight with MVP, it is nearly impossible to beat him in that type of fight, just based on his style, how unique it is. You can't really train for it. There are just these small instances where you can try to catch him coming in, maybe with an elbow, something like that, a knee. But like I said, he just closes that distance so fast. He's so patient. He fights on his own terms, in his own range. So can Shara catch him in? Is he going to clinch him? I don't know. I don't think his skill set lines up great for him, catching MVP coming in. Just the fact that he's so kick heavy, kind of winging his punches. Not to say he couldn't land an elbow or a straight or something, but I'm actually going to go with the underdog here in MVP. Now, if Shara Bullet goes out with the game plan to wrestle, to clinch, then I will probably not be feeling great about this pick. But I assume with Shara's skill set, he's undefeated. He hasn't really had anyone that's been made him feel like he needs to land the takedown. I don't think he's going to expect that from a guy like MVP coming up from welterweight. So I'm going to go with MVP. I think he gets it done by decision. Would not be shocked with the knockout, but decision is going to be the pick. And then here we are, the main event, Israel Adesanya on a fight night card, taking on Nassourdine Imavov. This really feels like a make or break spot here for Izzy. With a win, he's right back in the title picture. With an L, he's probably done. Not saying that he still couldn't compete outside the top 5, the top three, but he just doesn't strike me as someone who like wants to hang around as like a gatekeeper. Seems like he's pretty well adjusted, where if he's not in the title contention, he'll probably just pack it up. When we look at his recent stretch here, he has back-to-back losses, a decision loss to Sean Strickland, and then was submitted by Dricus du Plessis. I actually think he looked pretty decent in the DDP fight, especially on the feet. Did seem like he started to fade a little bit, which then kind of hurt his ability to dodge DDP's powerful punches, and then also couldn't quite handle the grappling to the same extent. I still think he is a great striker. He's very clean. I think the biggest areas where maybe we've seen a decrease is the durability and maybe the cardio, or more so just like the dog in him has taken a little bit of a hit. Obviously, he's still a monster, but like you look at him in that Kelvin Gastelum fight, he took a beating, was still in there going hard in round 5. It seemed like when he got tired against DDP, he started to wilt a little bit. Same thing in the Sean Strickland fight, right? Like he knew going into that 5th round, he was down, he needed a finish, and he just didn't push it like he would have needed to get the win. So based on his skill set, he 100% can still compete at the top level, and it's up to his opponent, in this case Imavov, to really kind of make him uncomfortable. So the big question is, can Imavov do that? I think he has the tools. I just don't know if he's going to optimally use them. Imavov 7-2 in the UFC on a 3-fight win streak over Roman Dolidze, Jared Cannonier, Brendan Allen. Cardio kind of used to be a concern for Imavov. It's been better in recent fights, especially when he's not like actively defending takedowns. If this is just a standing fight or he's dictating the grappling, I think the cardio is definitely going to hold up better. And he does have the ability to mix in the wrestling. He landed 2 takedowns against Joaquin Buckley, 3 against Chris Curtis. Now, those are both guys who have been pretty tough to take down. I will note, though, they are kind of stockier, shorter for the weight class, not someone who's super like lean, can keep distance like a guy like Izzy. On the feet, he is a clean striker, good kicks, mixes it up with the knees, the elbows. I think for Imavov to win, he's going to need to push a pace. I think he should be trying to find his way into the clinch, even though against most guys, he can stand from the outside. He can kind of pick him apart with the leg kicks, the lead leg teeps. I don't think that's the path to beat Izzy here. So if he can get his way into the clinch, land some of those elbows, some knees to the body, just kind of wear on him, make him, carry his weight. If you can make Izzy work, I think that's really going to help him in this matchup. You can't just stand at range and trade jabs and leg kicks with Izzy, because that's just not the fight that's, going to lead to a victory here for Imavov. I've gone back and forth on this one. Like I said, I think Imavov has the tools to win. I just don't know if he is going to execute on them. I'm going to go with the underdog. I'm going to pick Imavov by decision. I think he can do it. If Izzy won, I would not be shocked. I guess maybe like the deciding factor here for Izzy is that as of late, aside from the Pereira knockout, he really has not had that finishing upside. So for him to win this fight, kind of just needs to stay standing. He's picking them apart, winning 3 rounds. I just think Imavov has a way of making this a grosser, kind of grimy matchup. And so that's why I'm going to go with him. Going to pick him by decision. But like I said, would not be shocked if Izzy ended up picking up the win here. But that is going to wrap it up for my full card predictions. Let me know your thoughts. Let me hear your picks for the main card. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.